Hello. Welcome to the podcast. It is called No Ask, and I am here, joined as always by the Joey.
Hey, it's me, the Joey. You
Hey,
introduced me.
I know. Last time you made a big deal about it, so like the past couple days, he mentioned it over and over again.
I didn't make a big deal. I just thought it was funny because I was so taken aback, and
because literally your first one was like,
Yeah, I was expecting you to be like, I'm joined as always by Joey, but instead you're just like, this week we're talking about goals. What's your goal? And I'm like, normally I use that.
It's like
time.
when you have it rehearsed in your head, and then you're just like, no, he threw it off plan. So today's episode is a little special because it's our 10th episode of No Asked, and I know it's wacky. It's awesome,
crazy.
What are we? We're like at 40 subscribers now.
You know what that means? That means 10 weeks.
10 weeks.
That's give or take ish.
Yeah.
It's actually over 10 weeks because the first few episodes we did them every other week.
Oh yeah.
And so yeah,
like 12 weeks or 13 weeks or something.
That makes it feel like we've been doing this for a long time.
Yeah.
We should be way more professional by now. We're definitely. But yeah, 10th episode, which means
today we are gonna I got thrown off. Today's No Asked is how do we run a podcast? And so I feel like we have a little bit under our belt, so maybe we should share that because I've had a lot of people ask me. I don't know about you.
No, I've had a couple people, and it's definitely come up more recently. Like, I didn't realize that people our age were starting podcasts, Like, it seems interesting to me that most of the podcasts that I listen to, it's like older people, people that are like 30 and up. And so lately, I've been seeing stuff in around the school, and people have been like, oh, yeah, like, I want to host a podcast. Like, you want to host a podcast?
Yeah,
and sometimes I'm like, you don't have anything interesting to say.
Ouch.
No, there's no one that listened to this podcast because they're not cool.
Right.
But no, yeah. So I'd love to hear your process of making a podcast. How does it go for you?
What's that like? Don't throw this on me. No, I just tell people that I have someone who does all the work for me, which is you.
Yeah.
And then I'm just there, the personality. The pretty face for the thumbnails.
Which, I mean, honestly, that's how it works a lot in real life. Like, and we're doing this without a bunch of extra steps. We don't have a super producer. We don't have an editor outside of like the two of us. We don't have anyone to run like social media marketing. If I had it my way and we were professional, those are 3 people I would hire.
Yeah.
But we don't have those people. So
it's just us, and we kind of do it, which it's doable. And
I mean,
that's why I like tell people, it's like, you can do it. Like, there's not a whole lot that has to go into it.
Yeah.
Obviously we want to like put out good content. So.
No, and we definitely put in like more than we have to. Like, we don't have to do a video podcast. We could just stick audio. We don't have to have a set, but I don't know if we have space for it. And so I was like, hey, what if we just turn my bedroom into a studio? And then you're like, all right, that's cool, I guess. And then you decided it was okay to take the smaller bedroom.
Yeah. It's like, oh, that's the excuse he's using.
Yeah, because I use this bedroom so much for everything, bedroom related. But no, yeah, it's much easier than you think to start a podcast.
Yeah. So today I kind of want to talk first of all like about like the producing of it, like what it takes to do it. And then the second half kind of talk about content because it's really kind of hard to lock down like what a good podcast idea would be. So starting off, do you know like the equipment that you would like recommend for starters?
Okay. So growing up as a kid, I was like, I want the best microphone.
Yeah.
All right. And then I looked up best microphone in Google and hit enter. And then it comes up with a $4,000 microphone. And you're like, I want the best microphone I can afford.
The best microphone under $50.
Yeah. So my first and foremost, I would say the best thing to do is to save up for equipment rather than buying equipment in tiers. So what I mean by that is like, it's the mistake I made. I bought a $10 microphone for my first microphone. And then after that, I bought a $60 headset that had a microphone built into it. And then after that, so it's like, you see, I ended up in the end spending more money on microphones.
And you ended up with the same microphone.
Yeah. It's like, I ended up like along the way, I want to say I spent probably in total like $300 on microphones, not including these. And so it's like $300. And then I bought these for less than $300, but they are the best microphones that I've owned. Now, I would say a good starting microphone is probably a USB. Um, if you have the money, I'd go for an audio interface. Now,
Mhm.
what that means is you have this brick.
Mhm.
Basically, it takes XLR inputs, the analog from the XLR, turns it into digital, and then puts it into something your computer can read and understand.
Mhm.
And so you can use that for whatever audio recording program you use.
But you need the interface because your computer doesn't naturally have like a port for the XLR cables.
Exactly. Yeah, XLR cables are like for stage mics usually,
Mhm.
is what people would probably typically think of them as. So like if you see someone doing an open mic at a bar, they probably have an XLR microphone. Just it's the professional standard for it. It's because it carries more information and it can actually power the microphone. So went off on a bit of a tangent. I would start
Mhm.
with a USB microphone. The first microphone I had that was like halfway decent was a Samson CO1U. I am not sponsored by Samsung,
Mhm.
but it's a decent mic and it gets the job done. And that's really the first step is having the equipment and having equipment that sounds good because you can tell the difference between something that's recorded on your phone and something that's recorded on a
Oh
USB
yeah,
microphone.
especially if you're wearing nice headphones that are right in your
Mhm.
ears, and
Oh my
you
gosh.
can hear all the
Yeah.
white noise and
Well,
stuff.
and it's so interesting, like being someone who consumes podcasts a lot, listening to podcasts that have like very low production value. You kind of get used to it after a while of like listening to it. But then
Mhm.
if you like switch over to like even just like music, you're like, oh wow, there's so much more like depth and like bass and
Mhm.
all this kind of stuff there that I didn't hear before. And that's something I'm really proud of is that now with our podcast, I can switch from our podcast to another podcast, and sometimes the podcasts that are like professional and have these big sponsors don't sound as good as ours.
Mhm.
And so I'm like,
A little proud.
okay,
Yeah.
whatever. It's just not a big deal. It's all good. But now starting out, it just takes a microphone that is above just the standard what you have in your home, most likely, unless you're
Mhm.
into production,
Yeah.
in which case you have these kinds of things. You
But I feel
don't
like a
even
lot
know
of people who
anyways.
want to start a podcast were like you when you're young, and they're
Mhm.
like, I want the best I can get,
Mhm.
and you don't need it
Yeah,
for the most part.
you don't need like that $4,000 microphone.
No, not right away.
No,
Yes.
not by any means.
Mhm.
And a lot of times you may not ever end up needing that. There's a lot of
Mhm.
podcasts that don't use that microphone. Um, Now you will get up there. There's the next tier for us. I think if we keep going with this, is in a few years I will get a $400 microphone.
Mhm.
Uh, and even that, like once you get to a certain level in audio recording, like those leaps don't necessarily do as much.
Mhm.
So it's like the difference between a $10 microphone and a $60 microphone, astronomical. It's
Yeah,
like
for sure.
a $10 microphone is just like it's ass. It's probably like 8-bit audio quality, which means that oh god, how deep do I get into the science of this? Because I can go on, but
But yeah,
it just
8-bit, and then you can go up to 24-bit,
yeah,
and then
24 is like standard studio.
Mhm.
So like that's what you would most likely hear on whatever music you're listening to is
Mhm.
something around 24 bit. We record at 24 because we're cool.
Mhm.
All that really means is that there's more points that are on the wavelength that are recorded.
Mhm.
So a good way to think about it is if you're recording something at 8-bit, you're not being as precise with the audio that's captured uh, because
So the computer guesses a little bit, and that's where it
yeah,
sounds a little choppy
it
and
starts to
stuff like
sound a
that.
little choppy, starts to sound a little tinny, and that's just because it's not getting as deep in there. So you're cutting up the same amount of audio. Think of it like a log or a piece of wood.
Mhm.
So you can cut up that piece of wood into 268 slices. And that's going to get you pretty close as far as like that. And the log in this case represents like the amplitude of a wave.
Mhm.
And so when the computer is trying to read this thing back, it's like, oh, I've got 265 slices, or sorry, 268 slices uh, to read from.
Mhm.
But when you jump from 8-bit to 16-bit, I believe it's like 6,000 slices that it cuts into.
Mhm.
And 16-bit to 24 goes 18,000, something like that.
It's a lot,
Yeah, it like gets more and more precise, which means that the audio you record the peaking won't happen quite as easily, especially once you like add a little bit of compression onto it. And it just means those things that you like when you yell and you go up, it becomes much less distorted once it gets up into that higher range. Whereas if I'm sure you've noticed if you watch like these like little streamers or people on YouTube, when they start to scream, it like gets super ear rapey.
Yeah, it just feels like your speakers are like blowing out.
And that's when that's what happens when you have that lower audio bit depth. So what was I talking about before that? Before I went off on a science lesson.
Oh, you're just saying that your USB would probably be this bit depth.
Oh, yeah. So yeah, moving up to like USB, the difference in quality is crazy. But then moving from like our USB to our audio interface, you have another great big leap. But after that, it's like, okay, so microphones kind of start to level out just a little bit. And so you're not necessarily like the most expensive isn't always the best. You should definitely research what you're going to use, the kind of voice that you have, because there are different microphones that pick up voices differently, and some voices sound better on different microphones. That being said, the AT2020s that we use are really solid, like all-around vocal and audio microphones. I've used these to record concerts with like symphonies and stuff. I've used them to record vocals and instruments for just like basic little performances, and now I'm using them for podcasts. And so they're like really good, really versatile, which is why I like them a lot, because I do a lot of production outside of just this. So definitely research the right microphone for you.
Definitely.
Just price range and all. Don't go all out. You don't need to, especially if you're like being like, oh, I'm gonna start a podcast. I'm gonna do like, I have to
try this little thing out.
Yeah. Don't like try it out with like by breaking bank on it. Because I know a lot of people who have done that. It's like, oh man, I'm gonna try this thing out. They spend $600 and then never touch it after a week, and I'm like, oh, that's just like not being used. And
definitely,
to me, equipment that's not used is worse than not having equipment. I'm just like, you're wasting it. You're squandering this beautiful thing that you could create things with.
And then, so yeah, my next point, kind of bouncing off of that, is beyond better equipment, what can you do to improve your audio and then video quality for the people who want that?
Well, there's like these little tips and tricks in editing that I learned from years and years of watching YouTube. That's honestly like the best. Like, I'm not gonna be one of those people that tell you it's like, oh, don't go to film school, because I'm in film school. I'm one of them trumps. But there's a lot of stuff out there on YouTube. Like you can very easily like just be like, all right, how to do podcast audio editing, and you'll probably come up with like 100 to 600 different videos that'll tell you. But editing is a huge part of the podcasting process. Once you learn to edit, like you can cut things out. Even if you're not doing like this mastering and post-processing, you can improve the quality of your podcast simply by making those pauses that are really awkward just a little bit shorter, a little bit less
starting
awkward.
out, it's hard to like just continually talk, and so this would help remove some of those breaks.
Oh yeah, and practice talking and talking on a microphone, because it's a lot weirder than you think it is.
It's different. You're like, oh, I talk all the time, I'm so good at this, and then you get on a mic and you're like,
what do I say? You're like, what do I do?
People can hear me.
Yeah. Oh no, people are gonna listen to me.
No,
you're gonna listen to my voice. And they all left. They all left because of that. But no, like there's a bunch. Oh my god, there's so many things you can do.
What's the best space to record in, would you say?
I would say like a smaller space, lower ceilings. If you can afford it, get yourself some sound foam. Better sound foam than this.
Carpeting.
Stuff, carpeting.
Like not hard surfaces, I guess is the goal.
No hard surfaces. If you can avoid it, no parallel walls. But most places you live in have parallel walls, unless you have an actual studio that you've built yourself. Some sound foam, lots of soft objects in it just to absorb all of those sweet vibrations.
So record in a pillow fort.
Yeah, if you could.
It's the dream.
I would love to record in a pillow fort.
That'd be fun.
I think we should do that sometime. Oh, we should have like
enough pillows.
A fort episode. I don't know.
That'd be great.
We do have chairs though. We could like sling some like blankets around. Have a little. Oh, I've got a bunch of fairy lights, dude. What episode should we do this for? Like episode 50.
Okay.
No, we should celebrate 50 subscribers.
We're not gonna make it to 50.
We're not gonna make it to 50. We're gonna run out of funding. But no, like just little things to improve quality, like not even having to do with editing, although editing is like the number one. You should definitely rehearse some of your podcasting stuff before you ever even upload it.
Definitely.
We did that, and I think that it helped us out a lot.
Yeah, so our first podcasts on our channel weren't the first ones we recorded.
Nope.
We recorded some before that, and they were not great. And even our first ones were a little iffy, but you're getting progress, and so
yeah,
it's definitely a good idea.
We did like 8 weeks of podcasts before we even started doing podcasts, which is weird to think about because it doesn't feel that long looking back.
No, just like 4 months ish.
Yeah, and like we were just having fun.
Yeah,
and I think that's like number one as far as like when you want to start doing a podcast, you should have a little bit of fun doing it. Like no one should feel like, ugh, why do I do this every day? Like why do I get up and try and think of like doing podcast stuff? It's like, no, you should. I mean, especially for us, because it's like we're just two dudes who just so happen to be best friends, who one of them was like, hey, do you want to talk to me on a microphone? I'll send you a microphone. And then you're like, I don't know. I was like, no, come on.
It's coming.
Let's do it. And here we are.
Yeah.
Doing stuff a lot later, different microphones.
And it's so much easier and simpler than like, because I was scared at first. Like, what am I going to do? Like, he's the film major. I'm just some kid. And so it's so easy. Like once you think about it, like I feel like I could start and do my own podcast without you if I wanted to. Like I just have the basic enough skills. Oh no, he's learning. He's becoming too powerful.
I shouldn't have taught you how to edit. It's okay. I still own the audio editing software, so it's all good. But no, you don't have to have a $3,000 computer to do this either. Like audio editing is simple enough. Like you can do it on your potato that you've got right in front of you.
And it can't even run Command and Conquer 2.
No, it can't. It's it's a thing. Anyways, but like, okay, I guess that's kind of it as far as like things you can do to help audio video quality is just do some editing, cut out that like extra shit, which I will say just kind of applies to anything in the as far as like digital content creation. You always need to cut more than you want to. Granted, we don't always do that because
it takes more time. Yeah.
Like right now we're doing 2 podcasts a week. We're both in college.
Yeah.
It's a thing. It's we don't have a whole team behind us.
No.
But I think at the same time, just having done this and doing it, like the fact that we do it twice a week, you're gonna get a little bit better at talking on microphone. Yeah. There's a lot of times I kind of forget that we're recording stuff. I'm just like, oh, man, I'm just talking. And then we get through it and I'm like, oh, yeah, we need to stop and like stop the camera and restart it.
And then we'll just sit down and start talking again.
Yeah, we have to cut out like, I feel like it's gotten worse actually, because it used to be we'd hit record, sit down. Hello, everybody. Welcome to our podcast.
But no, it's a minimum of like 2 minutes now. We're just like messing around.
We're just doing weird shit. I should put that out. If we ever do a Patreon, I should like just put out all the weird shit we do off camera. Well, off camera. Yeah, on, you know what I mean. But no, edit your videos, cut it down. Start with a time that's reasonable. Like a lot of people hop in and it's like, I want to do an hour-and-a-half podcast. I want to do a 2-hour podcast. Like start out with something that people want to listen to.
Yeah, I was about to say.
A lot of people aren't going to listen to this poorly produced, low quality thing for an hour-and-a-half. So,
because even ours are like 45 minutes sometimes, and people are like, "Those are long." Like,
yeah,
like,
no,
sorry.
When I show it to people, sometimes they're like, "Oh, wow, that's a really long episode." They look at like the Humorish podcast. I feel like every episode we've had or recorded of the Humorish podcast is over an hour. It's just because I get to talking with my friends, and then I'm just like, whatever. But not that this is different, but it's a little different. We have a little bit more structure here.
Definitely.
But yeah, I'd say like keep it around like 30 minutes ish at first, and then build your way up to it, because then people will want more. And so give them a little taste at first.
Definitely. And that's kind of the thing, is like the reason you do this, because you want people to hear it. And so sometimes that's not the easiest thing to do.
Yeah.
So I was curious if you had any tips on like marketing yourself and just getting people to watch and subscribe.
Get over yourself. I'd say that's the number one thing. Is you have to be so fucking vulnerable. You have to be able to look someone in the face and be like, I talk into a microphone, record it, edit myself, listen to my own voice for sometimes multiple hours at a time, and then upload it.
So I want you to listen to it now.
And I think that I am worth listening to. Sounds narcissistic. You gotta be a little bit to be an entertainer, but just get over yourself and do it, which is something I struggle with. But also, like number 2 on top of that, kind of in the same realm, is you have to be willing to accept critique after you do that. Because if you are opening this up to people being like, this is this beautiful piece of art that I have made with my voice, and I'm talking to my friend, you have to be willing to accept that some people aren't going to like that. And you have to be willing to accept the people who like the thing that you're doing. So some people who like really like podcasts or really like the specific podcast that you like, the genre that you are a part of, they're going to give you tips. And a lot of times those are the things you want because that's your audience.
But they sound hurtful sometimes.
They do. Sometimes when you're told, it's like, oh, could you try and be a little bit less nasally? You're just like, I have a deviated septum. There's nothing I can do. But like, you have to be okay with the fact that people are going to have opinions.
Definitely.
And as an entertainer, I think it's one of the biggest cues you can get is when you have an audience that's willing to talk to you and be like, hey, this is what feels off. Because a lot of times they're going to notice it before you do, because you're putting it out and editing it, and you can just kind of become like tone deaf to it.
For sure.
And so if you're doing, say, like a story podcast where it's like, oh, I read a poem or a short story every week, and there's something like just a little bit off, but you don't quite know what it is. If you show your podcast to people who listen to these kinds of things, they're going to be like, oh, well, you don't have any audio transitions. You don't have any like cues. You don't do any segments. You don't give your opinion after, like whatever like thing that's missing. And they're going to tell you, and that'll help you get some more ideas. And as a creative, I think that's great, because I think you should always be evolving your content. Definitely. And like trying to be better. So yeah, be vulnerable, get over yourself.
Definitely.
Just do it. I know that's not necessarily...
Put it out on social media, tell your family, tell your friends. I feel like every time that I tell someone like, hey, I do a YouTube channel, and they're like, can I see it? And I'm like, sure, look at that. Always get a subscriber afterwards, because they're like, well, even if I don't watch the videos, I'm going to give you that subscriber. It feels really good to say like, hey, I support you in this super tiny way.
Yeah, and then that also becomes cool, because I've had that happen where it's like, oh, I subscribed to be nice, and I started listening just to be nice, and then it was like, oh, this is pretty good.
I kind of like these.
Yeah, and they're like, oh, wow, their production quality is pretty decent. And then I'm just like, whatever. I just threw it together. It's not a big deal. It's not like I spent thousands of dollars on all of my equipment, and it doesn't even look that nice. But yeah, no, that does feel good to get like that little subscriber, that little oomph. I do that all the time. I think that's why I check my app so much. I'm just like
one more, please. One more,
just
please.
One more,
please.
It's like, it's a little drug, gives you that little like dopamine rush, and it's better to me than like Instagram or like Facebook or whatever, because
you had to put effort into making that thing.
Yeah, it's like, and not that I don't put effort into like some of my Instagram stuff, but it, like on YouTube, it's like they are subscribing to you.
Yeah.
Like that word in itself has this like heavy meaning in my mind. It's like they are agreeing to see your stuff every time you post it. Like they are agreeing to like submit themselves to your whatever creative angst you're going to vomit out into the internet. And I'm just like, wow, that's deep. And so to me, it feels like a big deal when someone's like, it's like they choose to subscribe, and then they hit that like button and they comment down below, and that'll make you a really cool person if you decide to do that.
We beg you. But now you can listen to our ad, and you can be super happy about that, and they will love us for you listening to them.
Yeah, unless you're on YouTube, in which case
you don't get ads. Lucky you. No. So yes, we are back from our beautiful ad break. And so the first part was kind of about the producing, the little technicals and the science behind the sound and the computers and whatnot.
Because I'm a nerd.
Yeah, but you're my nerd. And now we will be on to the theater nerd stuff and like the subject and the creation of like the fun part about having a podcast.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
the actual talking and the stories and whatever.
I don't know. It's pretty fun to learn all the science behind like how sound wave works.
For losers.
Like, you know, how the whole process.
Weirdo.
No, just learn about compression.
Lame.
EQs.
No, but I wanted to first like kind of like talk about like getting a theme, you know, painting in broad strokes. And so I guess kind of wanted to talk about some like tips that we had learned over the past little bit of time. And one of them that I felt like was really important was think about a topic that you can do repeatably. Something that like doesn't have a finite end and something that you can do on like a weekly basis. And I feel like that's really important to having a good podcast.
Yeah, I feel like we had this conversation pretty early on too. It was just like, all right, let's do a podcast. And like, this is something you definitely like before you buy equipment, before you like go out of your way to like really put a lot of effort into this, you need to make sure it's something that is replicatable and like easy to do. Like, and not to say it's like, oh, you need to like not put effort into this. You know, you want to put the least effort in for the most cash, because you're not gonna make cash most of the time. But yeah, no, like coming up with that idea is so important, and it's the easiest and hardest thing you will ever do in a podcast. What was your process with coming up with Noah Asked?
At first I wanted to do these like big looming questions and like solve the world's problems.
Yeah.
And then you realize like, first of all, there's only so many of those. So then like each episode you're like, wait, I got to think of like these really hard questions. And then second of all, I'm just throwing these at you. So that way I get a genuine answer from you. You have to think about those where I've had time, and it makes it a lot more difficult. So our content's not as good, but also it's a lot more work on me to help find those questions each week. And so that was my struggle.
It can definitely become like a big hassle. I remember in the beginning, and of course we do a little bit more prep now, like all of this, as much as it looks super improv, it's only a little improv. Where like, you know, I'm reading off a script right now off this teleprompter. No, it's not true. But like, good podcasts are prepared, I'd say at least like 3 times as long as your podcast is like beforehand. We don't follow that every time.
No.
But I think that, you know, your podcast is an hour. To get a good hour's worth of content, you got to spend at least like 2.5 hours like researching a topic to actually be able to talk about it. Not every topic is worth that 3 hours, but I think that makes it better to understand your topic and be able to like throw these things out there and provide points and counterpoints, which is definitely a struggle when you start throwing things at me, a normal human being, just like on the street, and you're just like, hey, what do you think about this crazy thing? And I'm like, I don't have an opinion.
Never heard of that.
I didn't realize that was an issue. Oh, please.
Mommy.
God, how'd you get in my house? And then I realized I have dementia.
It was all a dream.
It was all a dream in the end. We're great writers.
But another part about like being repeatable would be like something that you can control the content of, I want to say. Because you hear about people like, oh, like I have super great conversations. Hi, I should just like record that. And it's like, you don't know if that's going to be a good podcast or not.
Yeah.
And so
you don't like, and even if you do, like there are some people who are hysterical high, and there are some people who act absolutely normal while high. There's a guy that I found out recently who smoked weed who I had no idea the whole time. I was like, really? He's like, oh yeah, dude. I'm like, I'm stoned like all the time. I'm like, what? He's like, just, you know, I feel better. Like and for some people that's great, because if I were to theoretically use said substance, I'm usually not very productive. I do a lot of repeating the same things because I don't remember the thing that just came out of my head by the time I finish the sentence.
You don't do that super well when you're completely sober as it is, so like, well, just throw a drug on top of that.
Hurtful but fair, I guess. But no, I do that a lot. I do a lot of tangents because it's fun to just talk, and I like to hear the sound of my own voice.
This is a stream. You just want to follow it, and then at some point it ends, and you're like, wait, what am I doing here?
Yeah. But no, like you should definitely be able to control your content, like you said, because you're gonna be stuck with it for 100 episodes,
Hmm.
300 episodes,
And you
uh,
want them all to be kind of different if you can.
mhm,
That's one
and
thing.
good.
Hmm.
You want your like content to be as consistent as possible. Like it's okay to have like, oh, like that wasn't a great episode,
Hmm.
but it was still like something that I would listen to. A big piece of advice I give people is I was like, look in a podcast that you love. Open it up on Spotify, open it up on Anchor or whatever you use, and then scroll through. How many episodes are there of that?
Hmm.
It's like, are there 400 episodes? Are there 600 episodes?
Hmm.
Are they like Chris Hardwick and just passed 1,000 or did
Not yet.
not quite almost to 1,000
Yeah,
episodes?
like 12 years worth of podcasting.
Yeah, it's like look at that, look in the mirror, take a good hard look and think, can I do this for that long?
Hmm.
Can I like replicate this same like formula that many times and have it be successful 80% of the time?
Yeah.
Nah, well, it's lower that 70% of the time.
Don't need to set ourselves to a
Yeah.
standard or anything.
But like,
Yikes.
I think that's like a super important question to answer and kind of have with yourself, where it gets a little bit deep, where you're like, oh, I just kind of want to do this for fun. It's like, yeah, but once you get an audience, I feel like you kind of get this obligation,
Hmm.
It's like, oh, like people are coming to watch this. Like people want to see this.
Hmm.
And you're letting down not just yourself, or like if you have a co-host, your co-host, uh, and you're letting down like this plethora of other people, whether it's, 10 or 15 or 400, it's
Hmm.
this, to me, I feel this weight. I'm like, oh, if I don't put this up, if I don't upload something, then like
Hmm.
I owe them an explanation,
Right.
because they have subscribed to me for a service
Hmm.
that I am no longer providing. And to me, that doesn't feel good. I don't like letting people down or
No, not
saying
at all.
no.
It's a pain.
So don't do that with your podcast.
No, never. And so I feel like something that would help with that is like really knowing like the breaking up in segments of your podcast.
Mhm.
We aren't the best at this, but I know
Mhm.
a lot of podcasts that have very structured segments. And it's like, we will first do this for 10 minutes. This will take about 15 for our next segment. And I feel like that's really useful for one, managing about the work you're going to have to do beforehand, because like, oh, I just need to break up these parts and do this.
Mhm.
It also helps with your time, because you know how much each segment should probably take.
Mhm.
And I think it also helps with like your audience knowing what they're going to get.
Mhm.
And I feel like those are all really good things. So if you can
Yeah.
break up your podcast, it's probably a good idea to really have it
To get a
segmented.
good outline
Mhm.
of it. Those things that and when you took a public speaking class, or maybe they called it communications or whatever in high school, where
Mhm.
they have you do this like outline with like 1, 2, 3, and each 1, 2, 3 has an ABC. Those are important. You actually like people. You're thinking, you're like, I'll never use that. Well, what will I ever use that for? You'll use it for podcasting.
Remember that first draft of that English paper you were supposed to write but never did? That's
Yeah.
what this is.
Yeah. It's the nerdy part of performing,
Mhm.
where you actually have to prepare. Like improv is great. I love improv. I love doing improv. There comes a point when you have to prepare, because like stream of consciousness doesn't work forever.
No.
Especially if you're like putting out content weekly, because then you kind of start to get the same. You
Yeah,
start
it's
to
limited.
regurgitate the same things.
Mhm.
You only have so much experience, so you kind of want to be able to add to that.
Which is crazy for me, feeling like we put a ton of content at such a young
Mhm.
age. It's like, we're going to run out of stories, like,
Yeah.
what are people going to come for?
See, that's
Yeah.
why I drink.
To make stories.
To make stories. But no, I do worry about that sometimes. I haven't talked about this with you before. Like, have you like been kept up awake at night thinking about this yet? Because I have. I've definitely laid down and been like, oh my God, I'm a boring person. Like, I don't do anything. I go to school, I come back, I make a podcast. For a while we did 5
Mhm.
days of content a week. And I was like, I don't do anything outside of that. Am I boring?
How are you going to build up like more information to then put into these podcasts?
Exactly. It's like if I'm spending all my time doing these.
Mhm.
So that's kind of why we didn't really talk about it, but we did
Slim
cut
back.
back on some of our stuff. That's one reason that I validate to myself it was okay to do that. Another reason is sleep and self-care because turns out your body needs those things or you get real sick and then you don't get better for a long time. And your body's just like, yeah, fuck you. I'm like, oh.
To be fair, you're giving your body the middle finger for like a month, and then it comes back at you one time, and you're like, "Oh no, I'm sorry. Why are you doing this to me?"
Oh my god, I've been cheating the system for so long. Yeah, no, it definitely makes sense that it's fighting back. I don't like it. I understand I deserve it, but I just feel like maybe okay, I learned my lesson after a couple days. You don't have to make me sick for a whole week, and then there's a whole other issues with that where you're catching up on school and shit. And I'm like, ugh. But anyways, back to the podcast about making podcasts.
Yeah. So a big part about that podcast is the hosts. And so I was curious if you had any advice on like the number of hosts you should have or the kind of people if you should like try and mix personalities and things like that.
I think it's really helpful to mix personalities. I like that you and I don't get along on every single subject. And I think we talked about that a little bit in the relationships episode. I think that having a relationship that is opposite, but also with that tinge of like, with like a through line of common ground.
Yeah.
Because, you know, they say opposites attract. It's not always true, but it definitely does make like an interesting show when you have two people who are arguing for different things. As for like the amount of hosts, I've seen podcasts done well with like 7 people, which is a lot of people.
But assuming someone was starting out with little experience, do you think they could handle 7 people?
No, you should not do 7 people. You know why? Because all your friends, as cool as they are not actually performers.
No.
They're not, they don't understand that what you're setting up in front of them, like with microphones, doesn't mean that they should like lean into them and like scream at the top of their lungs. Like they see these, they see the movie versions of this where it's like you take the microphone or you just hold it in your mouth and just like, yeah.
I didn't level for that.
Yeah. It's like there's this whole other side of leveling. We didn't even talk about that. Google it. It's important. Especially if you're loud like I am or get loud. But no, your friends aren't going to realize that it's a bad idea to talk over one another is like the biggest thing with those big podcasts. While there are a lot of people, you'll never hear more than like 2 people at once. Like you might hear like a third person interject, but what good podcast etiquette is, once like another person starts talking, you shut the fuck up and let them finish what they're saying. Which some people have an issue with, especially when you get to debating and all that. And I think I had a big issue with it in the beginning of our podcast experience because our podcast experience.
Hey.
Sorry, I was just like, oh, what a interesting concept. But no, like trying to figure out, it's like, oh, is he gonna stop? Should I interject now? Can I interject? Am I talking too much? Is he talking too little? Most of the time I find that I'm talking too much.
It happens.
It's what
but
I
it's
do.
our dynamic.
Yeah. I'm the talkative one and you just say things every now and then. I don't know what you say.
Hopefully they're witty or funny. I don't pay attention to them.
Yeah, I know you don't pay attention to what I say. I can watch your eyes glaze over after about 4 seconds where I'm just like, yes, here's your topic.
Another tangent.
Yeah, you watch the through line of the topic just go away. Just like off in the distance as your eyes glaze over. But no, like I've seen podcasts done okay with one person. I don't personally like a lot of podcasts that are just single person podcasts because
I don't know if I've listened to one.
They get real monotonous.
Oh, I'm sure.
It's all just like them having these topics and it's basically what we do, but it's one person. So if you were to take your outline, your lists,
ask the questions and then go and answer them from what I've looked at.
Yeah.
That's wacky.
It's like what people do when they're like super confident, but also trying to like make friends in a new social setting where they're like, where was I born? I'm glad you asked. And then they like go off on their own kind of thing. It's like a whole podcast of that. And I'm like, wow, this kind of sucks. So I wouldn't recommend doing that. I would recommend having one other person. I find it super handy to have you around because I don't always have good things to say.
When you run out of the words and stuff, it helps. And also just like bouncing off ideas and things like that. Oh my
God. Yeah. I love doing things with another person. It's not because I have a hard time with independence. I'm actually, I'd like to think of myself as a fairly independent person, but I'm very social. And if I don't get that social action, I get real sad.
Also, we wouldn't get our super fun bits. You can't do a bit with yourself.
Oh, you watch me.
You can try.
No, I don't think
I'll watch
could.
you suffer. Don't worry.
No, I love doing bits, which you know, because I force you to be a part of them, and you sometimes are like, oh, I don't know where this is going, but it's okay because
sometimes you get through them. Sometimes you get to watch the grass and burn, and that's just as fun.
And that happens, but I'd say always at least have another person just to bounce ideas off of, if nothing else. If you want to do your single person podcast, who am I to tell you to not do it though? Like if it's what you're passionate about and what you love, fuck what I'm saying, go for it. Well, don't fuck everything that I'm saying. Like you should definitely like listen to the technical parts of it at least.
Learn how to edit,
Yeah.
those things were useful.
Yeah. Or you could just put your garbage out on the internet and have no one listen to it. That's also totally fine. Tell everyone to subscribe, and then people do it, and then they unsubscribe
because they realize. Even your mom's like, a little too racy for me.
She's like, wow, did he talk about his dick? Unsubscribe. No, my mom isn't even subscribed to our channel.
Whoa.
Yeah.
I have a better mom than you. Take
that. No, I tried to show her our podcast once, and she's like, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, did
she say if she'd be on it though?
She did agree to be on it. Hey. She was like, I don't know what I'd talk about. Like, oh no, don't you worry. Yeah. I've got that part covered. Like we'll definitely talk about lots of childhood trauma and like why I talk about my dick so much. Yeah.
You will be trapped in a corner on microphone, and I will get some answers out of you.
But it's like you don't have to worry about what to talk about, Mom. We'll take care of that. But
don't worry, I talk enough for the both of us.
Oh my God, my mom talks more than I do.
Fair enough.
So
it's a family thing.
It is. It's bad. It's not great all the time. Like you guys think that I tangent. You should go and like be at a family reunion or some get together. Well, you shouldn't do that because I don't even want to do that. It gets real.
Nobody really likes it. Yeah.
It gets real rough real fast.
But watch from a distance.
But yeah, you'll just watch everyone talk about their own topic to each other. Like, they're like, I will have one topic. I will shoot at your direction, and you'll come at me with your own topic. Both of them.
So you'll be like, "What do you think about Trump?" And I'll be like, "Gun rights are cool."
Exactly.
Like, what's going on?
Completely like those are a little more related, but it's like they can be completely dissociated.
Have you heard about the orca whales?
And I'm just like sitting there in the corner of Christmas, just like, can I please go home? give me like the $40 or whatever, and let me leave.
I like just booze myself to sleep.
I can now. That's great. My family. I don't think anyone in my family is going off on a tangent again, but I'm not sure if anyone in my family like ever actually like obeyed the legal drinking age. But for some reason, when it comes to me, they're like, "No, you can't have a drink. You're not 21 yet." Well, guess what, bitches? Guess who's the new family drunk? Showing up to every event, just completely toasted. Full bottle of whiskey in tow.
And they can't stop me now.
Nope, they take it away. Guess what? I got a bottle of rum in my trunk just for occasions like this.
That's wild.
But no, you should have a co-host.
Definitely. Do you feel comfortable like giving like a max number for starting out that you think would be a safe place?
I think 3 is okay. Especially if you have a dynamic that allows you to have a super producer or a producer. Super producer just does more than a producer. So
that's why they're super.
Exactly, because they're real nice. It's not like a super senior where it's like, oh, look at you. You're a senior. You're so adorable for being here an extra 3 years. But no, it's like if you have a super producer, it can be handy because they can have a microphone that they sometimes talk into when you're fact checking. Which is something that we don't have that I feel like we should have because we do a lot of just generalizations that we just throw out there sometimes. Sorry, I do a lot of generalizations that I just throw out there sometimes. And so the super producer can have a microphone and tune in and be like, oh yeah, actually like this and that, and settle disputes. And then it makes your podcast more interesting because then you can like lean on the side of education.
Knowing that the facts are going to come.
Yeah.
Like, and we can move on knowing that a fact checker will come and correct us in a second.
Let us know and help us like move topics along, especially with like news or science or anything that requires factual evidence.
Long story short, we need a super producer.
Yes, we do.
We're accepting applications.
Yeah, for an unpaid intern to edit all of our videos, all of our audio. I'll teach you how to do it so you can get a college credit for it.
Hey.
How do I? Never mind. Sorry. I was like, how big would we have to be before we do? I want to be like super young, teaching kids that are not that much younger than me how to edit. And just be like, it's like, yeah, back when I was your age. It's like, how old are you? It's like, I'm 24. And it's like, I'm 23. It's like, well, son,
Yeah.
do you want the fucking credit or not?
Then.
But yeah, no, I think 3 is probably the max, and like that's only in that like kind of special scenario where the third person doesn't talk for most of it. It can seem kind of rude to be like, hey, do you want to come and do the work for my podcast but not talk very much? Yeah. Some people love that though. For you and I, we're kind of like, we love the camera. We love to be on camera. We love to be on microphone. There are people who much prefer to be behind all of the scenes rather than on it. And so that can be kind of a good like middle zone for that. You have to have a special kind of friend. But 3 would definitely be the max because it can get really hairy really fast. Like even with 2 people, it can get hairy. But I do have a quick question. So we started doing podcasts when we, yes, we did. We did start doing podcasts. Indeed.
We've never started.
We started doing podcasts when we were miles apart.
Yes.
So do you think that helped our ability to kind of like banter back and forth and not interrupt each other?
I think so, because when we did our original podcast, we did it over Google Hangouts and we live streamed straight to YouTube. But it's kind of weird because you gotta like wait for the camera to shift over, and it's like hard to like see if you're gonna stop or not. And there's always, you don't want to leave a big gap, and so you get really used to like just waiting for that perfect time. And now that we're in person, you have those little cues. So it's almost like you trained in like high altitude so you can be better on low altitude.
Yeah.
It's like we trained a little bit when it was harder. So now it's a little easier now that we're together. And so.
Because we can read each other's social cues. It's like we're in
And we
sync.
had to like know each other's minds to know when like your dips were going to lead to like you stopping and I needed to pick up or whatever.
Yeah. And that definitely, I feel like, comes from us working together and doing improv. And so like we kind of learned a little bit of how each other's minds worked anyways. Granted, there was about a year between that and us like starting to do this kind of stuff again. But yeah, it's super important to be able to read your co-host. Read and like understand. It's like, oh, well, they're gonna tangent. And sometimes like I feel like part of our dynamic is I'll tangent until you stop me.
Yeah.
I'll just kind of keep going until you're like, yeah, but the topic was this. Like, oh yeah, I was trying to get around back to it, but I took a wrong turn over by.
I'm not great with
directions.
directions.
Yeah. So on that note, you could also do podcasts long distance.
Yeah.
Which I wouldn't recommend doing forever because
it's hard.
Yeah, it's tough. There's a lot more editing if you want to do it right. You can do what we did, which is we live streamed it, which then forced us to have to put out videos after we got together, because then it was just like, oh, well, now it feels weird to not be on camera and talking. I would say like you could start a podcast long distance as long as eventually you kind of realize you're going to have like in-person hosts or in-person guests anyways. But it can be done. And it's just when you edit it, you'll have to edit out those like sweet, like sometimes 1.5-second pauses because Google Hangouts or Skype or whatever doesn't always like keep you perfectly real time. And so it can be really awkward to have like a podcast. It's like, yeah, what do you think of that, Noah? And then like
it's great.
Yeah, it's great. Or just like you say a joke and you wait, and then a second later I laugh. And it was like, oh, that's just
cringy.
It feels hurtful.
Is that a pity laugh? Is that why you waited?
Yeah. And so more editing, but it can be done. And it's still fun because I was able to talk to my friend.
Definitely. So like we saw this earlier. The main conclusion of this all is like keep it simple, stupid is the phrase I've heard.
Yeah.
And so it's just like, start off, just get like the basic microphone that'll just get you by. Make sure your theme is something that's like painted in broad strokes so you can like adjust it and like make it to what you really need it to be, but also something that's repeatable. And yeah, like make it open so you can have guests and things to change it up. And
yeah, that's definitely, I feel like that should be the name of this episode even. Just like, I mean, I know we do like, Noah asked about how to do a podcast,
Hey.
but no, that's like with a lot of entertainment and a lot of like podcasts just specifically in this scenario, keeping it simple is the thing that will keep you alive and will keep you sane. Because if you decide it's like, oh, I want to do a podcast where I interview an interesting person locally every week, it's like, that means you have to go out, find a person, work with their schedule to have a time where, like, because if they're an interesting local person, chances are they're busy. You have to go out, find a time when they're available, record with them on their schedule, come back, and then every week you're promising on the same day to upload it. So like you're putting up like a lot of work to put on your, like a lot of stress every week.
And this is like a high number, but even let's say you had like 50 interesting people, like you'll eventually run out, and then what do you do? And it's,
you gotta go
it's
further.
more work.
I have been the kind of person who has like pushed themselves to the limit of working and doing like 2 hours of sleep a night, and you know, just to produce some stuff. And it's not worth it. Like in the end, you might get like this sense of pride, but to do that for months on end is just like, it's harsh on your body, it's harsh on your mentality, and it can really like crush your morale if you like put your heart and soul into something, and then you're just starting out. So it's like, hey, I got a view in 4 weeks or whatever because I didn't have time to market because I was too busy trying to do all these other things. So keep it simple and have fun. Because
that's what it's all about.
Yeah,
it's the fun.
That's what
and
it's all about.
Money.
I was gonna say, and the cold hard cash, what you guys
the
can
50
give to
cents
us.
that I'm getting from our ad sponsors. What happened?
I don't know. What do we do?
Aliens.
It's been 10 weeks and we haven't had an issue with this yet. Kill me.
I'm sorry.
So is that the end? Is that how we end the podcast?
I hope not.
Do we have another question?
No.
Oh.
That is the end.
Well,
we collapsed into nothing.
We did.
Please wish us luck as we die here slowly.
In all, it turns out we don't know how to do a podcast.
No.
We just fucked it up. The ending is the hardest part.
It really is. The ending and like starting up. Like, even that's a little easier.
Like starting up has gotten way easier. But I feel like we still fuck up our endings. Yeah. Like it's also the part of the podcast everyone is clicked off by this point.
Yeah.
Like
and we just want it to be so good.
Yeah. Nobody's listening except for like someone who's like painting or something.
Love you, Mom.
And like can't like touch the button to like change it or whatever. It's like, oh God, I've got paint on my hands. It's like, I can't change it. And so now you're being forced to listen to us, which means we can tell you that you should subscribe to our YouTube channel and, follow us on Anchor and everywhere else that podcasts are found.
Hey,
there's also, I figured we should start doing this. I hate doing it, but there's a donate function on Anchor. So if you guys love this podcast, you should support us and give us a little donation because it's hard.
We're dying.
And yeah, we got bills to pay. And if you give us money, then we can keep doing this. Because goddamn, all these lights are expensive.
Hey. Watch our content.
Yeah.
Bye.